Welcome to MojoPlays. Today we're looking at the origins of Lady Dimitrescu, Resident Evil Village's most charismatic antagonist. And yes, there will be huge spoilers for Village in this video.
Before we begin, we publish new content all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
As soon as the trailer dropped for the next brand new mainline entry in one of gaming's oldest and most popular franchises, all anybody could talk about was one thing: the extremely tall vampiric woman known to us now as Lady Dimitrescu. Including her large hat and heels, she was 9 foot and 6 inches tall, making her over half a foot taller than the tallest man who ever lived. The outpouring of love for Lady D made Resident Evil Village even more hotly anticipated than it would have been otherwise, but now the game is finally here. Just how much do we know about Ethan's new nemesis?
Give the mortal to me, and I will ensure he is ready.
To start, Lady D isn't the main antagonist of Village. Capcom played its hand close to its chest and didn't reveal too much about the other leaders of the 4 houses in the pre-release material. Mother Miranda, a genius biologist and the Village's foremost cultist, is the real main villain. Lady D is instead the first antagonist that you'll really have to go toe-to-toe with, and the game's first major boss, in an encounter some would say is over much too soon. Through Ethan's adventures in Castle Dimitrescu, he learns plenty about the lady of the house and where she came from.
There you are. All this for a child who isn't even here.
Lady Alcina Dimitrescu was born at some point in the early 20th century and was in her 40s by the time she encountered Mother Miranda in the titular unnamed village in the 50s. It's not entirely clear how Lady D and Mother Miranda first crossed paths, since Miranda had already taken over the village as its leader by this point. Miranda did this upon discovering the mold that forms the basis of most mutations in the current Resident Evil story nearby. But they certainly did cross paths, and Lady D became one of Miranda's test subjects. She was infected with the Cadeau parasite, an organism developed from the mold by Miranda, perhaps willingly or perhaps not. Lady D, along with the other House Lords, was one of the few able to bond with the parasite fully, making her the gigantic vampire we all know and love. The Cadeau parasite grants her invulnerability and immortality, as well as making her grow to such an unusual size. But it also requires she dines on human blood, of course.
Mother Miranda, I regret to inform you that Ethan Winters has escaped that fool Heisenberg.
For the next 70 years between her infection and Ethan's arrival, she and her 3 daughters ruled Castle Dimitrescu with an iron fist, hiring young women to work for them as servants and then eventually killing them, using their blood as an ingredient in her famous wine. The game's first demo, Maiden, tells you exactly what it's like for these innocent victims. You play as an unnamed fleeing captive of Lady D, and are eventually pursued by one of her daughters and killed by the lady herself. As for those daughters, they're not her daughters at all. They're living swarms of insects grown, once again, by the Cadeau parasite, and given to Lady D as a gift by Mother Miranda. Incidentally, Cadeau means gift in Romanian, which tells you all you need to know about how the village's residents view their Cadeau-induced mutations.
You are so kind to me, daughters. Now, let's take a look at him.
The insect swarms are vulnerable to the cold air of the outdoors, much like how vampires can't go outside in the daylight. Ultimately though, Ethan, being Ethan, he's able to defeat all 3 daughters, Bella, Cassandra, and Daniela, and Lady Dimitrescu herself, once the parasite finally takes hold and turns her into a dragon monster. It's honestly more like Bloodborne than Resident Evil at certain points. But Lady D didn't come out of nowhere. She's influenced by both fictional characters and real-life murderers. The most obvious influence is, of course, Bram Stoker's Dracula. In Dracula, Jonathan Harker travels to a remote village in the Transylvanian region of Romania, where he encounters Count Dracula and his 3 brides. not too dissimilar to Lady D's daughters. They also live in a decrepit medieval castle and terrorize the nearby town. It's pretty clear that Capcom wanted Resident Evil Village to have vampires in it, and then worked backwards developing the Cadeau parasite story. Just like the many other folkloric enemies, such as the Lovecraftian fishman, Moreau.
Give him to me, and I'll put on a show that everybody can enjoy.
Ugh, so gauche. What do we care for bread and circuses?
Dracula was famously inspired by Vlad the Impaler, a medieval king of Wallachia famous for his cruelty. But there's another Eastern European serial killer hiding behind Lady D, Countess Elizabeth Bathory. It's rumoured that Bathory killed hundreds of young women during her 20-year reign of terror in Hungary, draining their blood and allegedly bathing in it in order to retain her youth. Since this was the early 1600s, it's not clear exactly how much of the story is true. She was arrested and kept under house arrest for the last 4 years of her life, found guilty of these heinous crimes. But true or not, developers have said that the story was a major part of developing this character. And far away from grisly murders and Victorian horror is the last part of the Lady Dimitrescu puzzle. She was also inspired by none other than Morticia Addams, specifically Angelica Houston's take on the character in the widely liked 90s movies. Of course though, Morticia Addams doesn't have giant Freddy Krueger-style retractable claws. Her tenure in Resident Evil Village may be ultimately short-lived, but she's still one of the best parts of an outstanding game, and one of the entire franchise's most memorable villains.
Check out these other great clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.